This is that nomenclature change. We can see that in Excel 2010 and earlier, the two pivot table tools menus were labeled Options and Design. And so as we go through the material, I'll simply refer to Options or Analyze as the first pivot table tools menu. So much of the time we'll be using commands from the first pivot table tools menu. That second menu is labeled Design. So when we utilize something on the Design menu, I will refer to it by its name. With the first menu, instead of saying Options or Analyze, I'll just refer to it as the first pivot table tools menu. So step 2 shows that we have the blank pivot table canvas on our worksheet. And step 3 shows us that field list that appears over on the right-hand side. So in the body of the field list, those are the headings that we were just discussing from our source data. And so those are what we need to be mindful of to make sure that they're understandable for us, because we're going to be making selections from there to actually build our report. Now that field list can take what sometimes feels like an inordinate amount of space up on our screen, and there is an X in the corner of it that you might sometimes reflexively click on to hide that field list. And so if that happens, if the field list is not present on the screen, if you right-click on the pivot table, from that right-click menu, you will then see at the bottom a choice that says Show Field List. So that is one way that we can display that field list. A second way, if we read the comment for step 4, on the first pivot table tools menu under Options or Analyze, there is a field list command over to the right that we can use to display our field list there as well. But there is a bit of nuance regarding the field list and the menus at the top because they are context specific. We are going to find that the field list and the menus do vanish when we move our cursor out of the field list. So depending on where our cursor is, we may or may not see the pivot table tools menus and the field list. The thinking is that if your cursor is not in a pivot table, then you don't need those tools available, and so they vanish. When you click back inside the pivot table, you then do need those tools, and so then they reappear. So here in Excel, notice my cursor is in cell A3, and I see the pivot table field list, I see the menus at the top. I'm going to take my cursor and then move it one cell up, and so now it's in cell A2, immediately adjacent to the pivot table. Notice the field list vanished as well as the pivot table tools menus vanished as well. So here what we're going to do is put our cursor back in there. So that's how we make them appear or disappear. But again, sometimes you might close the field list. You might click there because you want to see underneath it and then be in a state of, wait, my field list isn't returning. How do I get it back? So the two ways we can go about that, on the first pivot table tools menu, over to the right in the Show section, you will see a Field List button that you can click. That would restore it back. But that one's a bit nuanced and it's easy to forget where that is. I feel like an easier way is to right-click, and then at the bottom of the pivot table list there, notice it says Show Field List. You can click that. That too restores the field list here. Now the field list can tear off. I do not have to keep it docked in the side of the screen there. It can leave my Excel screen onto an adjacent monitor, or if I want to dock it back into place, if I just kind of nudge it near the edge of the screen, if I get it, then it will pop right back into that left-hand spot there.